the home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
Views,
there's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of The Cycle right here on Vuka Online Radio with me, your host, Mogale Mothale, Monday the 15th of April 2025. Thank you so much for streaming. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And we also thank my colleague Mongezi for the news bulletin. He will be coming back at 7 p.m. to bring you the latest in the news. A lot has happened. A lot has happened in the last few days. And here on The Cycle, just after the break, we will be taking you through some of the key highlights of the week. And of course, we will also be bringing you our main interview this evening. We will be talking to Nunu Ngoasheng, who is a funding platform analyst, the Just Energy Transition funding platform analyst in the Presidency. So she will be talking to us about Just Energy Transition. What is this? I mean, let me ask you this question. How many times have you heard people talking about Just Energy Transition and you were just lost? You just didn't know what they were talking about. You just don't know what is this and what is this about. And as an ordinary South African, where do I feature in this conversation? Because sometimes this conversation become too political. Sometimes they get even more academic, and you just don't know what is this. And tonight, Nunu Ngoasheng is going to help us understand, unpack this, so that by the end of this show, you at least have a light of what is this, because obviously we can't, even though we will try, we can't cover everything that there is to know about Just Energy Transition, but we will try our best so that you are able to, at least at the end of the show, you know what is Just Energy Transition, what it's about, and how does it affect you and me as ordinary South Africans. And of course, we will also ask them to come back to the show so that we are able to, in a way, have these conversations on a regular basis, because this is one of it's a hot topic, really. It's a hot topic. Remember, COP 2028, COP 2029 has been hitting hard on this message, and the United States gave us some billions of dollars, and Donald Trump came because it's not in favor of this new way of doing things, and he withdrew that. And the European Union came and said, we are going to give you some money so that you can fast track your Just Energy Transition. So we are going to have that conversation this evening with Nunu Ngoasheng, the Just Energy Transition funding platform analyst in the Presidency. And it's going to be quite an informative session for me, because there are things that I also need to know about the Just Energy Transition. So that's the conversation that we'll be having this evening with Nunu Ngoasheng, who will be joining me later on the show. We are going to, no, before we go to a break, let me remind you how to get in touch with us right here on Vuka Online Radio. We are at Vuka Online Radio on all our social media platforms at Vuka Online Radio, on X, on Facebook, as well as on Instagram. Do follow us. Get in touch with us so that we can have a conversation. What are some of the topics that you think we should cover on The Cycle? And you can also suggest some of the guests that you would like us to bring on The Cycle. The government ministers, we try by all means all the time to get them to come to the show so that they can just give us an update on their work. But sometimes, because these people are quite busy, very busy. Sometimes it's not easy to really get these ministers to come to the show. I was joking with somebody to say that, before Solimalat became a minister, we used to text each other. I used to ask him to come to the show, and he will come. But since he became a minister, because of how busy it is, the portfolio that he leads, it's really a big portfolio, and there's a lot that is happening. It's just not easy to get to him, and I understand, completely do understand. But we also have Garabo Kakao from the Democratic Alliance, who has been really helpful in terms of who to bring on the show and all of that. It's just that last time when we were supposed to have her on the show, there was just a lot that was happening. We couldn't connect with her. But hey, anybody that you think that must come to the show, please let us know so that we can try our best to bring these people to the show so that they can account to you, the public, because they are there to serve you. But without any waste of time, let's go to a break. When we come back, we are going to start off with our key highlights of the week.
How do you know the life of personal coach you're about to work with is who they say they are? How do you know if they can do the job? At the Africa Board for Coaching, Consulting and Coaching Psychology, we can tell you. So, before you share your secrets and spend your money, check with us first. Visit www.abccccp.com or call us on 012-751-7608. The ABCCP, the professional body for coaches.
Welcome back to The Cycle this evening with me, your host, Mogale Mothale. Let's go straight into our key highlights of the week. But before I do that, let me just, for the benefit of those who maybe just joined us this evening, we are going to talk about the just energy transition. That's what we'll be talking about. And I asked the listeners just before we took a break, how many times do you hear of this and you just don't know what is this and what is it about? And tonight we have Nunu Ngoasheng, who is the Just Energy Transition Funding Platform Analyst, who will be talking to us about this and what is it that and how does it affect me as an ordinary South African, and how can I get involved in this process? Because sometimes when parliamentarians are making submissions in Parliament, they will always say that they have made public consultations, and you go like, but I was not consulted and I'm a member of a public. How does this thing work? And sometimes people will use the Komati board example, and they will say that is that a just transition that you guys are talking about, and also the conversation around what is just about this process, and also the intersectionality between just energy transition as well as the climate change. Where does these two intersect? So that's the conversation that we will be having with Nunu Ngoasheng just after right after the break. So at this point, let's go into our key highlights of the week. We know that the GNU is going through some really, really difficult times. A lot is happening. A lot has happened, especially with the fiscal framework, a vote in budget, in Parliament, which was adopted. And there are those who believe that somehow, come the 1st of May, VAT hike will be scrapped. I don't know how that process will unfold, but we will wait and see. And the ANC, the National Working Committee, which meets every Monday or fortnightly, resolved to press a reset button on the GNU, inviting or opening talks with all political parties that are interested to come in and be part of the GNU. And this is quite interesting because right after that we heard that the Democratic Alliance, through their leader John Steenhuisen, saying that they are willing to open talks with the African National Congress on power sharing. And Helen Zille said that because I think Helen Zille was actually asked this question on SABC, Face the Nation with Clement Manyatela, and she was asked as to if the president decides to fire all DA ministers, what would you do? What would this mean for the GNU? And Helen Zille said that would be the end of the GNU. So quite interesting developments in the GNU at this moment. The tariff war continues between China and the United States. They normally say that when the two bulls are fighting, who suffers the most? The ground or the grass suffers the most. And I think we are the grass in this case, because these are two largest trading partners. And at this point, I think last week there was just numbers going around. 84% of the tariffs, Ning is 105%, and you just don't know. And at this point, we know that Donald Trump has halted all the tariff increases on all countries for 90 days to open up a space for negotiations. But the tariffs, they stand as they are with China. You can see that that trade war between the United States and China is still to continue. How far will it go? We just don't know at this point. So, but these are really devastating, but at the same time quite interesting moments, because you just don't know where things are going. What is this strategy? What is the strategy with the USA? And some are saying that actually this is the strategy that Donald Trump is using to say, I'm imposing this, and because this is too much for you, you come to me. And he, as he was saying, he used some words when he was addressing a gathering last week in Washington, D.C., saying that they are coming to me, begging me to say, let's negotiate. I'm willing to do anything, say. And that's what Donald Trump wants, because, I think that's just how bullies work. Quote unquote, please don't fight me on this. So that is what is happening with tariffs at this point. But it's a wait and see. South Africa is also on the list of those who has written to the United States to say we would like to engage with you, but we at this point we don't know when is that going to happen, and we just wait and see as to how this is going to unfold in the coming months. Last week, history was made, people. History was made when 3 South African clubs made it to the CAF Champions League semi-finals. That was Orlando Pirates, Mamelodi Sundowns, and Stellenbosch FC. I feel for my team, Kaizer Chiefs. I mean, Kaizer Chiefs should be in the top 3, really. But we are just going through a rough patch at this moment. And I'm sure my colleague Mohanguna is covering more on that story. So I'm not going to dwell much on that story. But another story that I think is worth the celebration is the fact that the South Africa Under-17 has qualified for the World Cup, Under-17 World Cup, which will be taking place, I think, will be taking place in Qatar, if I'm not mistaken. So, but Mohanguna, every day from 3, he unpacks all of these developments in the sporting field. So, another story that actually got me excited, really excited, because I've been worried and complaining for those of you who have been following this show about our border management. I think we haven't been doing well in terms of securing our border, making sure that we know everybody who comes in and who goes out with what, coming in with what. So the Home Affairs and the Border Management Authority briefed the media last week. I think it was last week, Thursday, when they briefed the media ahead of the Easter holidays. By the way, we are going into Easter weekend this week, so it's going to be quite busy this week. And the Home Affairs saying that the Minister Leon Schreiber announcing that they will be using drones that will be going along the border lines just to monitor the situation at the border. Let me see if I can find a clip where Leon Schreiber is talking about this development in the Home Affairs. I think I got the clip. Let's take a listen.
With the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development to pilot the use of these devices and measure the impact that they have in the port environment and in enhancing the capability of government to prevent, detect and deter illegal crossings into South Africa. A few months ago, I stood at this podium and we announced the data that came out of those operations. What we saw was a 215% increase in the number of attempted illegal crossings by undocumented persons that were prevented. And we even were able to showcase thousands of instances where the use of these drones actually led to apprehensions directly. In other words, they enabled the detection of someone trying to cross the borderline, the deployment of BMA officials and resources, and then the arrest and direct deportation of those individuals. So what we were able to do in December was to prove that the concept works. We were in 5 different port environments with our partners from agriculture, and that was a very valuable opportunity for us to actually demonstrate the value of this approach. But
so yeah, Leon Schreiber speaking last week at the media briefing, talking about the drones that we'll be using or deploying across our borders just to monitor the situation and also to make sure that they just keep it tight at the border. I think I saw a video last week of people who were actually denied entry at the border, and I don't know how they crossed, but somehow they crossed and they got into a lineup of taxis that were actually taking these people. So I think we need to deal with all of this, but this is where we are going to leave it for the key highlights of the week. Right after the break, we're going into our main discussion for this show tonight. We will be joined by Nunu Ngoasheng, who is the Just Energy Transition Funding Platform Analyst, talking to us about what is this, how does it work, how does it affect me, and how will it affect our pockets. We are complaining about the VAT hikes and all of this, but how is this going to be funded? She will be talking to us right after this short break. Stay tuned.
The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is a professional development center for professionals who aim to improve their professional standing. This means that the learning programs we run are more than just academic programs. They are work-based programs that focus on leveraging your current experience as a professional to build your overall profile. A year down the line, the Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is developing into a preferred center for professional development in Pretoria, with 8 professional development faculties including accounting, teaching, entrepreneurship, as well as IT and many more. For more information, go to acwbl.org or dial +27 12 751 7608. The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning, where work is learning.
Welcome back to The Cycle this evening with me, your host, Mogale Mothale. This is the show that comes to you every Monday from 6 until 7 p.m. This evening, as I said just before we took a break, that we are going to be joined by the Just Energy Transition Funding Platform Analyst, Nunu Ngoasheng, who is joining us on the line to talk to us about the Just Energy Transition, because this is something that we've been hearing about a lot in the last few years, and many of us, we actually don't know much about this, and we have Nunu Ngoasheng to actually first to start with explaining to us what is this, why does it matter, and also later on the show we'll be also talking about the funding models that are available in this process. So we are going to, without any waste of time, just to start by welcoming Nunu Ngoasheng on Vuka this evening. Good evening, Nunu.
Good evening, Mogale, and hello to the listeners.
Thank you so much, Nunu Ngoasheng, for joining us this evening. Maybe let's just start here, because these words are thrown around a lot, and sometimes these discussions becomes very political, and at some points they get very academic. So we just wanted to maybe break it down for the benefit of our listeners out in Matatiele, out in Raspukune, as to what is just energy transition and why does it matter?
Thanks for the question, Mogale, and I'm really glad to have the opportunity to demystify the JET. So the just energy transition, or the JET, is our country's commitment towards a cleaner and more green economy, towards more sustainable sources of energy like wind and solar. As some of the listeners may know, that most of our electricity system is very reliant on coal, which is very polluting to the environment, and it also contributes to climate change. And so the JET is really about how can we make our economy more green whilst also ensuring that we leave no one behind. And so it's a recognition that we need to address climate change whilst also ensuring that we uphold the principles of justice and fairness. So it's about creating opportunities for workers, communities, and regions that have historically relied on coal for their livelihoods to transition to more economic diversification. And it matters because, number one, South Africa is a historically unequal society. And so, as we know, we have very high rates of unemployment across the youth and overall, but it's also, and as a result of our historical sort of inequality, we also need to ensure that we address some of the injustices of the past, whilst also ensuring that there are economic opportunities for everyone to take place and contribute to our economy. So it's about addressing climate change, but also addressing inequality.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that you are in your answer. You are also touching on issues that has to do with climate change, justice, and fairness. And we're gonna get to the just part of the energy transition. But before we get there, maybe if you can just talk to us about the intersectionality of the just energy transition and climate change, because in your answer you referred more to the current weather patterns that we are experiencing in the country and of course even across the globe.
Thanks for this question. And I think, these two, the JET and climate change, are intrinsically linked. So they're very sort of intersectional. So climate change is affecting everyone, but it doesn't affect all of us equally. As you can recall from 2023, when we had those very severe floods in KZN, and I think even in 2024 and 2025 this year, we've had many regions of the country that have experienced high amounts of rainfall, which have led to a lot of flash flooding, which has impacted, our general infrastructure. And so there's a real sort of pressing need to address climate change across the globe. So South Africa has committed to keeping global warming down and addressing climate change, but also in line with our sort of economic development pathway. And so when people are already dealing with sort of extreme poverty or lack of service delivery, they are the ones that are most affected by climate change. So that would be droughts, the flooding, as I mentioned, and other extreme types of weather, hurricanes, tornadoes, for example. And so the just energy transition, it's a recognition that we can't separate what's happening with our climate from some of the social and economic issues, right? So if you're having a community which is under service that has been hit hard by, extreme weather conditions. Obviously, they've already got socioeconomic challenges that they're dealing with, and then climate change just worsens it, right? So people often say that it is a multiplier, so it worsens some of the existing, or it exacerbates some of the existing conditions. So that's sort of where that concept of intersectionality comes in, because it's understanding how the environment, but also our social and our economic conditions are all linked together, and how when you have stresses on one of those sort of pillars, it does impact the rest of the pillars. And so the JET is not just about sort of reducing our carbon emissions, it's also ensuring that we can transition to a more clean energy, but also ensuring that we then also increase energy access to underserved communities. It's also about ensuring that we have energy security. As we know, we have been dealing with an electricity crisis that has been going on for many, many years. So it's also about how can we ensure that we have secure, reliable, and affordable energy for everyone. Plus also that we mitigate or we reduce sort of the negative impact as well on communities.
And speaking about the energy, electricity crisis that we have been facing for the last few years, and in the last 2 years, I think it has been adverse because we're experiencing load shedding almost every day. But it looks like there's an improvement in the generating capacity of Eskom. But maybe just for you to maybe talk to us about how is this going to be implemented in terms of dealing with the electricity supply crisis that you have spoken about, and also because in the conversation there will always be we want to move into a much more cleaner energy, but in terms of moving forward with the energy master plan, in terms of the renewable energy master plan, if I can put it that way, how is this going to be implemented moving forward?
Thanks, Mogale, for the question. So the implementation of the JET is undertaken by a variety of actors. And so with our electricity sector, so let me just sort of go back a few steps. So the JET PMU, which is the Just Energy Transition Project Management Unit, which is located in the Presidency, which I am a part of, is overseeing the implementation of the Just Energy Transition Implementation Plan, which is a plan that is really an infrastructure and climate or carbon emissions reduction kind of plan to oversee the implementation of South Africa's transition to a more climate resilient and low carbon economy. And so some of the reforms that we've been seeing in terms of, yes, Eskom has been also working on improvements around efficiency and supply of energy. But one of the reforms that we've seen in terms of the market has been on private generation. And so that's why there's been a huge boom. Of course, there was a huge boom in renewables, but I'm sure you've seen, almost every shopping center, many offices and private households have solar energy to also improve their energy security, but they also can feed into the grid. And so one of the key interventions and one of the key needs in increasing our energy supply and also distribution is around building out our transmission and distribution lines. And so what you have in many regions of the country is that the grid is already at capacity, so it's already full. So the new energy in terms of renewables that is being built out can't really get to sort of all the far-reaching households and communities that we needed to get too, because we have a grid that is at capacity. So one of the key interventions and where we see a lot of the investment need going to, which is where the sort of JET implementation plan is really sort of addressing sort of the investment need of the energy transition and its implementation is around transmission and distribution to ensure that we can have more secure and secure sort of supply of energy and access for everyone.
Before we go to a break, because I think we are running out of time, before we go to a break, maybe just a quick one. Minister of Electricity, Dr. Hossein Soramokoba, spoke about distribution and transmission, and spoke about what they are going to be doing in the next a few years with regard to putting up transmission lines, not only in Mpumalanga but in other parts of the country. Is this plan somehow connected to what you guys are doing in the presidency?
Yes, so it is very much linked to how we are trying to mobilize finance and partnerships to ensure that this takes place. So yes, and the Ministry of Energy and Electricity, they are leading on one of our 6 core portfolios, which is on electricity. So yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. We are going to actually take a break. When we come back, we are going to touch on the just part of the energy transition and also talk about funding, as we have just mentioned right now. We are going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to continue with our conversation this evening with Nunu Ngoasheng. Stay tuned.
How do you know the life of personal coach you're about to work with is who they say they are? How do you know if they can do the job? At the Africa Board for Coaching, Consulting and Coaching Psychology, we can tell you. So, before you share your secrets and spend your money, check with us first. Visit www.abccccp.com or call us on 012-751-7608. The ABCCP, the professional body for coaches.
Welcome back. We are still with Nunu Ngoasheng, a funding platform analyst with the Just Energy Transition. So she has been talking to us about what they are doing at the Just Energy Transition Commission, which is in the presidency. And at this point, I want us to talk about something, Nunu, something that politicians sometimes wants to use this as a political tool, because we understand the nature of politics. Sometimes it's just taking advantage of the current narrative and use it for your own political gain. The just part of the transition, using Komati as an example, because people are saying that what happened in Komati was not supposed to have happened for various reasons. And maybe because you spoke about justice and fairness when you are, working on this. Maybe just to talk to us about the justness or the just part of the transition.
Sure, thank you, Mogale, for the question. And I think, this point around Komati is a particularly important one. And there's a lot of intersections with how we at the Just Energy Transition Project Management and specifically on the funding platform team are engaging with communities that are facing coal decommissioning and those who've already faced coal decommissioning like Komati. So just to sort of zoom in on the just elements of the just energy transition. And so as I mentioned previously, the just energy transition and achieving a just energy transition requires a high degree of coordination between a number of different actors, so government, business, the international community, us as fellow South Africans and those residing in the country. And so the just component, it means really that we need to manage the energy transition in a way that is equitable, especially for the affected workforce and communities around coal-fired power stations, and then also maximize and encourage the creation of meaningful employment. So that means focusing on upskilling and reskilling opportunities for the affected workforce and impacted communities, ensuring that there is a sort of well-managed impact of the transition on communities. And this is really where you see sort of a lot of the conversation around Komati happening, is that the impact of the transition sort of has been managed in a way that has been very destabilizing. So it's also to how do we create sort of supporting and sustainable local development opportunities in communities like Komati, right? So, for example, in the Komati community, and so let me just come back a bit. So this is sort of where the funding platform comes in. And so the need for the JET funding platform has arisen from a recognition that to date, most of the grant funding for the JET has been largely used for technical assistance and capacity building with sort of limited direct benefits to communities and workers that need to transition from coal dependencies to alternative sources of income and economic opportunities. And so the funding platform is a key intervention from the JPMU and the Presidency to help sort of direct funding to those community initiatives and sort of other economic initiatives in communities like Komati. So the funding platform itself is a matchmaking intervention to improve the access to grant funding for communities. So that would be CBOs, NPOs, but also for SMEs working in the coal value chain and across sort of the energy transition. It also is an intervention that is there to support obviously trade unions and the affected workforce, but also to provide capacity building support as well to local government. So that would be at the municipal level. And so what the funding platform does is that it's designed to help connect and good socioeconomically impactful projects or programs to grant funding. So there's a high degree of interest from the grant funders to support these just projects. So whether that be, supporting with ECD centers, across the Mpumalanga province, or social employment and social protection interventions, for communities and workers, or also to, support SMEs with feasibility studies to test new ideas and innovations, and different sort of economic diversification models, particularly around, sort of like mine rehabilitation is a big topic as well for us.
And this is quite important and very interesting. And maybe in the future, we can actually maybe just have a separate conversation on this, where we also just try and understand some of the stakeholder concerns, community concerns, and how those concerns are then being addressed. And when you're talking about revitalization or bringing back to life of those decommissioned power station, how do we then get young people involved in those projects? But that would be a conversation for maybe another day. Maybe just for you to talk to us about how is all of this going to be funded, because we understand that something needs to be done in order for this to really be a possibility. How is this going to be funded? Talk to us about maybe the funding model, and as well as where are you going to get the money?
Thanks, Mogale, for this question. As I mentioned, so the funding platform itself it's not a fund, but it's a matchmaking service. So it then connects people who have opportunities or who have ideas, projects and programs that they would like to see funded, but perhaps they don't have necessarily the access to the variety of funders that we may have. So there's a number of sort of corporate CSI. There is enterprise supply development funding that's available. There's also the empowerment foundations that have, significant endowments. And then, of course, we have our international donor community who have already programmed grant funding towards the JET and have other sort of interventions that are possible to come online to support some of these funding gaps. So that's really where the funding will be coming from. We're coming from a variety of actors, from the private sector to sort of the DFIs and multilateral development banks, and also to the sort of bilateral countries as well.
And maybe just to talk to us about, I understand that this is the money that will be coming from, different, entities, different, groupings. But maybe just to talk to us about because the conversation around how are we going to make this a success and this being something that is sustainable. The funding requirements, more especially, maybe let me just not necessarily more especially, but using the automotive sector as an example, people talking about, the batteries and all of that. How is this, the funding requirement? How are you guys working it out in terms of sectors like the automotive sector, the agriculture sector, or maybe even in the banking sector? Is there a model that you use to maybe say this funding will be looking or focusing on different sectors of the economy?
Yes, I just double click on the Just Energy Transition Implementation Plan. So that was a plan that was an implementation plan, a roadmap really, to understand how we can implement the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. So that was a plan that was set, that was written by a task team set up by President Cyril Ramaphosa to understand the scale of need to transition our economy from one that is heavily reliant on fossil fuels to more low carbon sources like wind and solar. And so there are 6 core portfolios. One of them, as I previously mentioned, is electricity. The second one is new energy vehicles. The third one is green hydrogen. And then we have our 3 just transition portfolios. So Mpumalanga is one of them, skills, and then municipalities. So across these 6 portfolios, there is already an investment quantum that is attached to all of these portfolios. And so the investment plan is really an understanding that we have a 1.5 trillion rand investment need to transition South Africa's economy. So there is a funding requirement across these 6 strategic portfolios. And what the JPMU, part of our role is to mobilize finance to all of these 6 portfolios and to direct finance to these sort of strategic portfolios across a number of different actors. I think we understand that the private sector is going to play a huge role in ensuring that the energy transition from a financial perspective takes place. But there's also, of course, a number of pledges that have been made by the international partners to support across the various portfolios. And so you also have lead institutions that are overseeing the implementation of some of these portfolios. So you mentioned the automotive sector, so the new energy vehicles, that's the lead institution for that is the IDC and DBSA, and then also for green hydrogen, it's also the IDC, and then for electricity, that is the Ministry of Energy and Electricity, and then for Mpumalanga, that is the Mpumalanga Green Cluster Agency, and then for skills, that is the Department of Higher Education and Training, and then for municipalities, that is SALGA, South African Local Government Association.
No, I would like us maybe just as we conclude, just talk to us about at what point are you going to be able to say this is what we have been looking forward to achieve and this is what we have achieved as the commission?
So, Mogale, we are tracking and monitoring our progress on a quarterly basis. We have a very robust monitoring and evaluation and learning system, our MEL system. So we are reporting on a quarterly basis how we are doing in terms of our progress to achieving the JET. We understand that the implementation plan and the investment plan are an extremely ambitious plan, and we understand that we've set ourselves up to obviously achieve this ambitious plan, but we also want to see how we are progressing and how we're learning in this journey. And so that is how we are reporting back to the public. And then obviously because we're located in the presidency, we also report back to cabinet.
Thank you so much, Nunu, for your time this evening. It was really a very informative session, and we hope to have something like this in the future with you guys.
Yes, we would really appreciate it, and thank you so much for the time. Thank you to the listeners. I hope they've learned something today, and if they want to know a little bit more information about us, they can go on www.justenergytransition.co.za.
Thank you so much, Nunu. We are going to leave it here with Nunu Ngoasheng. We are going to be back right after this short break. Stay tuned.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.
Welcome back. It's only a few minutes before we say goodbye. But before we do that, I just want to make a correction. Because during our conversation with Nunu, I've been saying that she is from the Climate Change Presidential Commission in the presidency. But actually, that is not correct. That is going to be. It's because they are all in the presidency, and sometimes they can be very confusing. But she's from the Just Energy Transition Project Management Unit in the presidency. So they are in the presidency, not really in the commission, the climate change, the Presidential Climate Change Commission. They are a unit in the presidency looking at just energy transition project management. So I just wanted to make that correction before I say goodbye. But I hope you enjoyed the conversation that I had with Nunu. You also learned from what we have been talking about. And of course, I would like us to maybe in the future to bring them back so that we can talk about opportunities that are there for communities, particularly young people who are in Komati or anywhere around the country where some of these projects are taking place. So this is where we are going to leave it for the cycle this evening. My colleague Mogale Mothale will be coming in the top of the hour. My tongue is just going around. To bring you the
home
latest
of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.